Woohoo! We are live and let's go and invite people, shall we? All right, cool. I think that ought to do the trick. And hopefully I have audio tonight. Last night, apparently, my recording wasn't so good, so I'm going to have to delete that. But welcome, everybody. So my name is Dr. DiNezza, and I am a chiropractor and nutritional therapy practitioner here in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, home of the Tar Heels. And this is the second of a two-part webinar that I'm doing for the holidays. Yesterday was paleo for Thanksgiving. This one is going to be AIP, or as I joke, paleo on steroids for the holidays. So because the audio was so iffy from last night's broadcast, I'm actually going to kind of combine the two and just delete the first one altogether. So I'll talk a little bit about paleo and a little bit about AIP. But like I said, AIP is kind of paleo on steroids anyway. So that will be largely a similar topic anyhow. So the nice thing is that paleo is relatively easy, air quotes, easy to do for Thanksgiving because, hey, at least you get to eat meat on this diet, right? So here's the deal. Turkey is generally fine. I wouldn't stress about the turkey. The only thing you have to worry about is when you go to other people's houses, they might try to sneak weird stuff on the turkey. I don't know if anybody would use flour, but perhaps butter to crisp up the skin. So make sure you ask whoever's in charge of cooking the turkey, ask them if they put anything weird in the brine, if they brined it, or sprinkled anything on the skin to make it crispy, or if they put butter like under the skin or on the skin to make the skin crispy. But otherwise, turkey is going to be the safest, most straightforward thing you can eat on Thanksgiving if you're doing paleo or AIP. However, the companion to the turkey, gravy, is going to be a little dicier. So that will be gluten central. It's like everybody's worst nightmare. So gravy, if you're going to somebody else's house, you could bring your own little container of gravy, possibly. Otherwise, if you're actually the one making the turkey and you're hosting Thanksgiving, then I could just make them eat my gravy personally. But I like to mess with family like that. Now this is going to be, so I've got my paleo people, my paleo on steroids people, and I'm going to advocate something here. If you have any wiggle room in either of these diets and you know you can tolerate rice, I know it's not paleo, but hang in there with me. If you know that you can do rice and you're not doing the acute elimination diet phase of paleo or AIP, then this might be one of those areas where you can use a little bit of rice flour, because I find that that works pretty well to make a gluten-free gravy. And I don't know, something about the quality of the flour, the protein, it works pretty well. If you don't have that wiggle room and you really want to stick ultra super paleo and you're doing the elimination diet, for example, and you don't want to muck up the results of that yet, then something like tapioca might work. What I would do is you could either Google paleo, gravy recipes, or if you look up how to make a roux, I think it's RUE, possibly with an X on the end. But if you look up how to make a roux, you basically start with some fat, and then you add flour slowly, and you brown up the flour a little bit, and then you add enough water or enough broth or liquid to make it a little bit more of a liquid and kind of a gravy consistency. So that's how I would do it. Ideally, I would use rice. If you want to be super strict and you're doing the elimination diet, though, or you know for a fact that you can't tolerate rice, then possibly tapioca would work just as well. I would just Google a recipe to get the ratios right. But I would for sure not mess with anybody else's gravy and even try that, because it's guaranteed to be laden with gluten. Uh, then moving on to some side dishes, some of my personal favorites. In years past, my family and I have made both gluten-free stuffing and gluten stuffing for my uncles and my dad. Last year we mixed it up and we actually did gluten-free stuffing for my mom and my husband and I, and we did paleo stuffing, which was cauliflower based. You chop it up fine, a little bit less fine than you would if you were to rice the cauliflower, but it's still chopped up pretty fine. And then you put in all the classic stuff like the celery and the onions and the sage and the same spices, and you cook it up as though it was stuffing. And let me tell you, it was so good. We're not even going to bother with the stupid gluten-free stuffing. We're just going to do the paleo stuffing again this year. We're just going to do the cauliflower-based kind because it was, we all thought it was better, and it's certainly healthier than getting the box gluten-free stuff anyhow. So that was a big revelation. And there's a lot of recipes for that, and they're going to be slightly, a little bit different. Well, one thing that was nice about that recipe too was my mom has one of those like electronic like skillet things that has, the edge comes up about yay high, and she actually made it on that on the counter. So we still had all of the stovetop, all of the stove, and this was completely separate on the counter, and it just kind of cooked and did its thing. So that was actually really convenient that we could just make it that way too, and it didn't really need high heat. In contrast, I would do mashed potatoes on the stovetop probably, but here's the thing. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not that riveted by mashed potatoes now, especially now that I don't eat dairy. It's almost like, what's the point? If you were wanting to do that still, again, I wouldn't eat anybody else's because they more than likely put butter and cream in it. It usually, gluten isn't an issue for mashed potatoes, but dairy definitely is. That's going to be easy enough to swap out yourself. Just make the potatoes, mash them yourselves, and then either add like a little bit of coconut milk. You could add ghee if you could do ghee. Just make sure it's one of the ones that's tested for casein content if you're autoimmune. There's not many that are. You have to actually look it up and Google it to find one that is. You could roast some garlic, like just throw the whole clove in some olive oil and throw it in the oven for like 40 minutes and soften it up. And you could pop out the cloves and mash that in with the garlic and make really nice garlic mashed potatoes. But honestly, I'm going to advocate this year that for my family, I don't even think we're going to do mashed potatoes this year because it's just a bunch of starch. That's not the highlight of the meal anyway, and it's just more work. So it's not my personal favorite dish, but there are ways that you can make that safer. Another one that I really, really like, especially with it being this time of year, that's really easy for a side dish is roasted root vegetables. Now, personally, I like to do this with the harder root vegetables. So things like carrots and parsnips and turnips and rutabagas and beets, all of them work really, really nicely and they cook together well. I wouldn't do potatoes and sweet potatoes because those are actually a little bit softer and you're going to have different consistencies. But what I've done before is just slice those up or cube them, however you want to do it. I like to slice them and arrange them in the pan, fancy if you want to get fancy with it. And then I toss them with a little bit of light olive oil, and that has less of the olivey taste than extra virgin. But I just toss them in a little bit of light olive oil, salt and pepper, and then thyme. Works really, really well here. And you throw them in the oven, roast them for a while, maybe broil them for the last couple of minutes. And they come out really nice and just lovely. And it's pretty simple, pretty healthy dish. My funny little story with that is that I have this one uncle who doesn't eat vegetables, literally will not eat vegetables. And all of us are always trying to get stuff into him somehow. But the one vegetable he will eat is carrots. So every time he comes over for dinner, my parents have to make some kind of like boiled carrot dish for him because it's something at least that he'll eat. So last year for Thanksgiving, I was in charge of making the carrots, and I threw in white carrots, which is what I called them to him. Really, they were parsnips. But I told him that I was making carrots and white carrots, and he did eat some of them. So I was pretty excited about that. Now, granted, my other uncle blabbed and let the cat out of the bag that it was, in fact, parsnips. But I did get that uncle to eat a couple of white carrots, so that was exciting. But that's a really pretty quick and easy thing that you could do. The only thing that's labor intensive is the slicing. You could even throw whole garlic cloves in that if you wanted to. I think that would turn out pretty good. And you could even do a lot of the slicing the day before and the peeling and stuff and arrange it in the pan. And then you just have to pop it in the oven the day of. That would be pretty easy. Same thing, mashed potatoes. You could easily make that the day ahead of time and be totally fine. I would make the stuffing fresh though. Let's see, what else do you have at Thanksgiving? We got turkey, we've got sides, bread. I mean, I don't know what to tell you guys. I think the bread is just going to be one that you're going to be sad about, maybe, especially if you're dining with other people who eat bread. There are paleo breads, but even paleo breads I have not been wildly impressed with historically. The only one that I really truly like is, I think it's Danielle Walker has a paleo blender bread recipe that I really like. It's pretty heavy on eggs, so it's definitely not AIP compliant. But for the paleo folk out there, if you're really jonesing for something that's reminiscent of bread, you could make that blender bread recipe. I think you could Google it even and find a recipe. You could do a recipe like that and then put a little bit of ghee or fake butter on it. But AIP people, I wouldn't bother. You could try to make almost like a fake pancake if you want to think of it that way, and do something with like tapioca starch, but I think I would personally just bag it. And there's so many other good, healthy things for you to eat at Thanksgiving that there's almost no point. Then, all right, let's get into dessert, and then I'm going to look and see if you guys have any questions. And if we have any Q&A, and if so, cool. And if not, well, you can still ask questions on the YouTube video later on. But for dessert and dessert type things, two things to keep in mind. Cranberry sauce is going to be safe. I don't think anybody is speaking anything weird in cranberry sauce except for like orange juice, which should be fine. The thing about cranberry sauce is it's god-awful sugary. And here's the pro tip. I've noticed in years past, because I sneak this stuff on my family, that I have started to cut down on the sugar that the recipe calls for by a fair margin, and it still tastes really good. So I think that, for example, when the recipe calls for a cup of sugar, I've gone all the way down to like a third of a cup, and it's still really good and sweet, and you almost wouldn't notice the difference. So if you're going to do cranberry sauce, I think it's safe. I think it's going to be somewhat paleo compliant, AIP compliant. Granted, paleo people didn't eat sugar, but paleo people didn't eat half the stuff I'm talking about. And they certainly didn't have ovens. So I'm not really one to be super strict about that. But if you're going to have a little bit of sugar, you could do it in cranberry sauce. Just make your own. I wouldn't buy the canned. And you can just cut way, way back on the sugar. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Then the ultimate is pie. Everybody wants pie. So the pie itself, you could pretty easily Google, especially pumpkin pie. That's pretty easy to come by and make gluten-free, dairy-free, etc. Even Googling like a vegan pumpkin pie. There's even pumpkin pie fudge that is delightful. I've made those in years past, and it's usually a coconut butter base and pumpkin together, and they're wonderful, and they're really easy to make ahead of time and then bring with you to a party. So you could do something like that. But even pumpkin pie filling, if you want to do a crust, you could easily do a nut-based crust. So just blend the heck out of a handful of pecans and a handful of dates, blend the heck out of them in a food processor, mash it into the bottom of your pan. There's your crust, and then you pour the pie filling on top, and away you go. That's not going to be AIP compliant because of the nuts, obviously. So honestly, AIP people, what I would do is just skip the crust altogether. You don't need it. The best part of the pumpkin pie is the pumpkin part itself, so I would just do it that way. Now, Cool Whip, whipped cream kind of toppings, that's going to be a little tricky. And here's kind of the pro tip with that. There are two commercially available, that I know of, commercially available dairy-free whipped cream toppings. There's one that looks like it's a Cool Whip container, and it's made by So Delicious, the company that makes, dairy-free ice cream and yogurt and everything else. And there's a spray can, like an actual whipped cream can. I've seen those for sure at Weaver Street, and I think at the Whole Foods in Chapel Hill, but I can't swear to that. The whipped cream is good. It's actually pretty impressive, and I think it's coconut-based also. The thing that I don't like about it is that the freaking can doesn't work. So we've gotten this an embarrassing amount of times. We probably have purchased this, my family and I, like 4 times because we were so excited about it. And every time we buy it, I kid you not, we use like a squirt or 2, and then the thing stops working, and we can't get it out of the can. and we followed the directions and we put it at room temperature for 20 minutes or whatever I said to do. We did it. And it's just the most effective product ever. And it ticks me off because I know there's product in there and it would taste good if I could get it out. So I just, out of sheer principle, I refuse to buy that ever again because I can't physically get the product out of the can. And that drives me batty. I don't recall offhand if it's absolutely AIP compliant, but I know it's coconut based, so it should be. The Cool Whip stuff is, again, that's so delicious. I don't know if they sneak any soy, lecithin, or anything in that, but it should be paleo and AIP compliant, relatively, minus the sugar. And that is fine. It tastes about what I recall Cool Whip tasting like, as far as I could tell, maybe with a little bit of coconut flavor to it, but it's pretty respectable and it gets the job done. You can also make your own whipped cream with the fatty part off the top of a can of coconut milk. So get canned coconut milk, don't shake it up, open up the top, and you should see that it's separated and there's a clear liquid down at the bottom and the fatty, kind of more coconutty stuff at the top. If you scoop that off, I usually do 2 cans at a time, throw it in a stand mixer like a KitchenAid, and blend the heck out of it. It takes like 5 minutes at least to even get a little bit of fluff into it. And then once it's fluffed up a little bit, I usually use powdered sugar and just add enough sugar that it has a little bit of sweetness to it. I don't go overboard. Now, powdered sugar isn't going to be AIP and paleo compliant because it usually has cornstarch in it. You could make your own by blending the heck out of some normal granulated sugar and adding a little bit of something like tapioca starch to get that little bit of starchiness to it. I'm not sure if they actually sell paleo compliant confectioner sugar, but you could look. But that is the one concern. If you know that you're reactive to corn, it usually has cornstarch in it, so I wouldn't use actual confectioner sugar for that purpose. But same thing with the rice. If you know, out of all the foods, if you know that you can tolerate corn decently well, might not be the end of the world to use it in this one recipe. I don't know. It depends how sensitive you are, and it depends where you are in your healing journey. For some people, they really can't afford to do that. And for some people like me, I'm a little bit more seasoned and I've navigated these waters for quite a many years. I know I can tolerate a little bit of corn. It's fine. I don't make a point of eating it much, but I can tolerate a bit of it. So I'm just going to do that because it's easier and a little bit cheaper. Same thing with the rice. I can tolerate rice. I don't eat it a ton. Maybe every couple of weeks I have some rice, but I would rather just use the rice and get a little bit better flavor out of it. But all of this aside, you still have a lot of options for Thanksgiving for the paleo people. So turkey, I told you what to look out for, but that's going to be largely safe. Mashed potatoes, just watch out for the dairy. Make your own. Easy to make ahead of time. Roasted root vegetables, so easy, so good for you. Really easy to do, and you could make that and chop that all up ahead of time and just throw it in the oven the day of. The cauliflower stuffing, I would do that the day of, but that is, I think, better than actual stuffing anyway. Bread, practically a lost cause. I wouldn't even bother trying. If you're going to do cranberry sauce, just cut way back out of the sugar. And the pie, I mean, pumpkin pie, you could either make pumpkin pie and still have some sort of Cool Whip to it, probably, or you could make the delightful pumpkin pie fudge squares and impress all your friends and family. I personally wouldn't want to share if I made them, but that's just me. But that is paleo and AIP for Thanksgiving in a nutshell. Let me look here and see. Sorry, moving the webcam. Let me see if I have any questions. Sorry, this will take a second. You've got a lovely view of the side of my head. I don't see any on. I'm going to check the Facebook page. This is the boring part of the video. Looking at the side of my head while I log on here and see if there's questions. Okay, I don't think I see any. So that means one of two things. Either that you already had this all figured out anyway, or perhaps I did such a good job gnawing your ear off that you just don't have any questions for me. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to end the live broadcast. This video is going to be up on YouTube indefinitely. So if you have questions for me after the fact on the YouTube, feed, whatever they call it on here, and I will try my best to answer that before Thanksgiving because I know you have to plan. But hopefully you have a wonderful Thanksgiving and a safe Thanksgiving. Don't get glutenated. And if actually, that's another good point of the video. So what happens if you do get exposed to something, if you do get glutenated or dairyified or whatever it might be? So my pro tips to you, things that are easy to come by on a holiday when a lot of stores are going to be closed. My go-tos tend to be glutamine. If you can get to like a Whole Foods or a similar store, they usually will carry glutamine. But the big thing actually is ginger. If you can get your hands on some ginger, peel it, chop it up into little bits, maybe put like an inch worth of ginger root and throw it in boiling hot water and let it steep like a tea for maybe 5 or 8 minutes and then drink that. It's going to be peppery and gingery, but ginger is really good antispasmodic and it's widely readily available. So even if you have to run to like the 24-hour Walmart where they make their employees work on Thanksgiving, some store that has 24-hour holiday hours is going to have ginger. So even if you can't get to like a Whole Foods to get things like activated charcoal and enzymes and glutamine, bare minimum, you could do ginger, and that should be something to calm down your gut. And you could drink that practically as much as you want. Turmeric is good too, but I think that's a little bit more exotic to come by when stores are going to be closed for the holiday. So if you get yourself in a pickle, ginger should help calm things down. And then when the stores open back up on Friday, maybe get your butt to the store and get some digestive enzymes and some other stuff to heal your gut. But anyway, now I think I'm done for real. Like I said, if you have any questions after the fact, feel free to comment on here on the YouTube video. And have a great Thanksgiving and have a great rest of your night.